Whoops.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Drawing Down the Stars. I'm your host, Snappy, and today we're having our Witches Symposium. So thank you all for tuning in. The idea of this is to have sort of like a fun, casual conversation where we're talking about deep philosophical, metaphysical topics, where we want to get into the meat of things. And, like I've been puffing on the Asterion. I'm sure everyone else here has been having a good time. And, we just want to kind of really have kind of a round table, free-flowing discussion. So to start things off, I'm just going to open it up by defining magic. In religion studies, magic is usually defined as any kind of ritual act that's done to change reality in accordance with one's desire. So what do you guys think about that? And does anyone want to start things off? And just introduce yourself when you do, please.
My name's Gnostic Informant, and that definition is interesting because people think of magic and they think of like a Disney movie with the wand or like pulling a bird out of a hat or doing some magic trick with some cards or something. But it really is just, in the ancient world, anything that you can do to enact your will upon the world around you. It could be anything. It could be telling something in someone's ear like this, and then they go off and they do a task for you, and then that task ends up creating something that you needed to be done so that you can go and finish off what you want. That's it. It could be something like that. And so the term magic, it's like it's been changed over time, but I think what you're doing right now is you're bringing it back to the original context.
Yeah, that's what we're kind of trying to get people to perceive it how it would have been, right? Like, and how a lot of various spiritual and religious traditions actually view magic, not what we kind of imagine it as in our scientific era where we disparage all this stuff, right? It's really all about kind of trying to imagine these various artistic actions that people are doing and trying to talk about them and how they work and whatnot. Like, I know, for example, go ahead, sir.
I was going to say this too, and then there's the other aspect of it is that this is the ritual aspect of it, where you really want something to be done, and then so you perform these rites, and these rites, what they do is they sort of spark something within inside of you, and that will, for whatever reason, make it more likely that you can actually go out and, like, you'll see this with like sports teams where they get together and they all get in a circle and they all start like getting real rowdy, and like that pumps them up before the game, and like that's a form of magic ritual right there because that got them into that zone. They don't even realize it. That's what it would have been defined as in the ancient world.
Totally. Like, I think about like the earliest examples of when we talk magic from like an academic perspective is cave drawings. And what are they doing? They're imagining themselves going out into the world and catching the game that they want. And then they're showing themselves in victory, having caught that animal, right? So it's this act of creating the reality you want into the future. And like, Wretch, I know you've done a lot of research into a lot of this magic stuff, and I know a lot of magic in the early kind of ancient peoples was all around these mnemonic devices. Do you want to kind of talk about that?
Right. Well, you gave a good definition of magic. It seems like a lot of scholars like to debate it endlessly as if every culture agreed as to what magic was or how it worked, and there's a lot of individuality in there too. Really, it seems like it's the individual approach to religion in some cases rather than the organized approach.
That's a really good way to talk about it, because you see that in a lot of our religious studies textbooks. They want to really emphasize this difference, that magic is your individual action, and in religion is that communal enforcement of action.
So one group's magic might call it a miracle, and then another group calls it magic, according to who's demonizing who or whatever. But it's at the so there's a lot of different ways to explain it, but it definitely affects consciousness. Ritual affects consciousness, and this had practical value from the earliest times to encode all of the tribe's knowledge into a mnemonic device and to understand nature. And as they understood nature, they tried to interact with it and work with it or manipulate it. So magic is at the root of technology and science and art. It's the source of all of it, ultimately.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Ammon, I wanted to ask you. So, like, when you're looking at the ancient Greek world, and they're talking about, like, how are they perceiving magic? Are they perceiving it in this very kind of desire based kind of will manifestation stuff? Because one thing that strikes me about the Greeks is they kind of expanded so radically. Like, you get that whole idea of theurgy, which is actually drawing down these divine. Like, how does that fit in?
I think of, you asked what you think of when you think of magic, and I think of sex. I think of sex and drugs. And I think of ceremony and music. And I think of images and catchphrases. I think of passwords and codes. And initiations. I think of initiation when I think of magic. I think of Jesus in that cemetery with that kid. I think of that kind of hot, steamy side of existence where you can draw to yourself every human being on the planet, right? You can bring that power to bear. That's what I think of when I think of magic. You can talk about classical definitions of it, which I don't want to. But I was just this morning, run to Homer, check out Circe, right? They're all like, oh God, here's a drug. The sorceress is in the palace. This is Bronze Age, right? Oh God, you're going to get, no, don't go in there. She's going to turn you into an animal. She's even drugged. This is one we haven't gotten to yet. Tell this to the people at Menorca. It's also the animals, man, right? Imagine that you have such a power, you have such a power with these drugs that you can be giving them to people and creating pigmen whom you will sodomize into submission. And if you don't, because you have the antidote, oh man, what are we going to do now? We're going to go through the rite and have sex, right? And ultimately, if we don't eat the abortions, we're going to produce the child that we can put through that death. People don't realize that Circe killed Odysseus. She killed Odysseus. She had sex with him and killed him. And that's what the Byzantine scholars are so interested in. How did she do that? It's okay because she raised him from the dead. So when I think of magic, that's what I think of. I think of sexiness and drugs and dark places. I think at night, they call them night rituals for a reason, right? So right. That's kind of where I go.
You know what I was just wondering while you're saying that is the sorcerer, witch, magic. Those are bad words in the later world post-Christianity. Those are bad words. Evil. You're dead. Put you on a stake and burn you alive. Those are bad words. But before, in the time of Homer, this was like a title of someone distinguished who had knowledge, who knew things, who was educated. This would be like a modern day PhD, like the sorcerer PhD or the witch MA. You know what I mean? Like these are people with super high knowledge and knew things and knew how to do certain stuff that most people didn't know how to do. And my question is like, what happened? And by the way, even Jesus gets called a sorcerer by his own people in the Talmud.
Right, exactly. And like we were just talking about Odysseus, right? These epics are designed to try to tell us what's most important about a culture, and they're supposed to impart the most important ideas. What is Odysseus doing? He's going out to learn the magic, right? What does he do after he's dead and resurrected by Circe? He goes and literally digs a trench and dives into the underworld to meet his mentor, Tiresias, right? Who tells him the future. and he's battling off the dead. He's slitting the throats of black boars, and they even talk about he puts this ergotized wine that he's pouring all over the place. Like, it's a very methodic, understood ritual. They're doing this analog where they're transporting themselves. It's like it's powerful stuff, and that's in the earliest Greek texts, right?
Yeah.
And those big cities that they built, we're talking Bronze Age, right? And those big cities that they built with those cyclopean blocks. I've been there. I've stood under the gateway of one of those, And when it says in the Odyssey that Circe comes out of her giant polished stone palace, right, right, and opens both the doors, right, because it's it's not like everybody else's house; it's a palace, right? And you got to think about what level of sophistication do you have in society?
Yeah, you can reach that. She's not some random witch living in the woods that everybody is like looking down on. They're looking up on her. She's distinguished.
Right.
So what happened?
The people at the dig in Menorca, they said, it's surprising the level. They said there has to be a level of knowledge there that's well beyond. It's like expert, pharmaceutical knowledge. They had titles for this, polypharmakon. These were the ones who mastered these substances, right? And the power there goes directly from that figure, from that queen, that Mycenaean queen, to the oracles. And so that power you have limited with Christianity. You don't, there's a reason the drugs and the Satanism are all connected to that oracular figure. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Let me throw something at you, all of you, and hear what you guys think. Because when you look at like Merlin, I think Merlin is like the last good example of like what a sorcerer, a state sorcerer is supposed to do. Their job is to work with the king and get things done on the side through their magic, through their knowledge, through whatever ways they have to get things done. They have to do it. So they're doing all this extra behind the scenes. They're like the CIA in a way, the FBI. They're like the underground, the knowledge, the intelligence, basically, intelligentsia. And so in the ancient world, you have, in every kingdom, you have if they have one, a good sorcerer, a good magician, a good magi to help them, make sure that the things on the ground level are getting done.
So Neal, you absolutely need to read about John Dee. And John Dee, I believe, is the truly last magician of the type that you're describing. He was the court magician for Queen Victoria, and he was in charge of her secret police. And like Wretch can elaborate on John Dee.
I didn't even know that.
That's Queen Elizabeth, not Queen Victoria.
Sorry, that's my bad.
See what I'm saying? And what I think the Catholic Church ended up doing is they sort of take that framework, but instead of having magicians and sorcerers, you have like bishops. And like they're doing the same type of dirty work, but it's like it's holy.
Oh, definitely. And you see a lot of this all over, right? Like you also see a lot of this in like the African traditions and whatnot. Like I wanted to ask Dion about this because Dion, you traveled all around Africa and a lot through Amazon. So you dealt with and you purposely sought out a lot of these tribal groups that were doing these more traditional ancient practices. Like, are you seeing them continuing this kind of a magic base, and are they doing the same kind of will magic that we're talking about?
Sure, it's still there. I was surprised. In Africa, it's very animist. And the church is there too. And Islam is very big. And even Islam and Christianity in Africa is they have a fervor to it. They get very excited, and they have a lot of the animist culture still mixes. It's syncretic, like in Cuban Santeria, in Yoruba culture, where they'll name the saints are really just African gods, Shango and Ogun and these different gods. They give them Christian names of Christian saints.
That's how it is, man. Yeah.
Yeah, they had to do it to go underground. But still in Africa, it's still big today. They have their national holidays, societies. You can go. It's recognized in their culture as a legit form of religion.
And I remember you telling me about when you spent some time in Benin, and you were telling me about the prominence of the women there, who were the central leaders of the snake cults and were in charge of most of the culture, right?
Well, no, this is a certain section, and for a certain reason. Now this deals with that city is called Ouida. It was a slave port, where they're getting the slaves there, and they've taken the men and the children, the boys, and so the women were left behind. So the women naturally became a matriarchal culture there in this old slave port. And they had their different voodoo ways. And later on in modern times, after, the slavery's over and everything's tamed down, women still in that culture to this day are approached by something called the Widower Society, which is this matriarchal voodoo society, because they still wield power in that city. Men are afraid of them. And they're famous for poisoning men and with their food, and but it came naturally. It came out of the slavery, because they took all the men. And the ironic part is, it was the other tribes selling off the other tribes. Sometimes the slavers didn't even get off the boat. They stayed on the boat there, and then the other tribes would fight and kidnap different tribes and send them there. And then towards the end, they just told the tribes, yeah, well, you get on too. We need you too. And they took them all.
Damn.
But there they have the snake. You're talking about the snake temple, and that's the python temples. And there, my experience there, I'll be honest, I got sick. I told him pull over the car, and I threw up. I don't like this place. He goes, and even they were laughing at me. He goes, well, I knew you were gonna get that way, because there's a real heavy vibe in this city, and it still has the old architecture. I think Portuguese, it looks like a Portuguese forts. It's this old slave port there. But when you go to the Python temples, they're trained, they're evolved. They grew up with these pythons and these snakes. Some of them are defanged, some of them are non-venomous, but the ones that are venomous, they build up immunities to it through handling it over the years. Imagine it's microdosing, like in Silicon Valley, where those CEOs were taking minute amounts of LSD. Well, right. Minute amounts of the venom, like minute. We're talking
there's that famous guy in all those Vice documentaries, Steve Ludwin, who's been injecting himself regularly with snake venoms of all kinds of types for over 25 years now. So.
Oh yeah. So they build up an immunity to it, and what it's mainly today, it's tourists. They take tourists there and charge them thousands of bucks to have initiations, and that's what they're doing. I'm not into that stuff. I went there to Africa. I was more into Eastern philosophy when I went there at the time, so I wasn't really into the voodoo stuff. And my buddy that I was staying with, the shaman, he wasn't into voodoo either. He studied in, even though he was an African shaman, he had went to France and studied theater. And so he was into a bunch of existentialism. And so he's like, you don't need this voodoo stuff. Because what happens with the voodoo stuff, you get a flat tire and you think your neighbor hexed you, and you're trying to make people fall in love with you. If someone doesn't love you, they just don't love you.
Right. No, there is dangers with a lot of that black magic and stuff. But I always find this interesting is these snake cults and these mother goddess cults. These seem to be the oldest and most predominant images that you see cross-culturally, right? Like we have those Venus figurines that date like over 250,000 years old. Some of them by pre-humans, like it's wild to think about how ancient this kind of roots are, right?
Yeah, the connections between snakes and drugs seems to be pretty universal and very ancient.
Look at the medical symbol right now. Go to any hospital, any hospital. Look on the window. You'll see the serpent on the staff.
Yeah, either Hermes or Asclepius. Either way.
I cut you off, Gong. My bad. I'm sorry. I was so excited to say that for some reason. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, that's all.
Can I ask Dion real quick? Is there a sexual aspect to the serpent play in Africa? Is there some kind of connection there? I'm interested in bringing back the old porneia, right? How can you have a word that means both to have sex and to practice the religion, to practice the mystery? How can that, or as they would have called them 100 years ago, idolatry and fornication, right? How can you have those two things join together? Did you, in your adventures, did you come across anybody who managed to capture that ancient Venus association with, the act itself and the orgasm and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I didn't participate, but I witnessed, I saw a lot of stuff, and you got to understand, when I went, this was 93, and then I went back again a different time in 94, a long time ago, and I was in my early 20s then. And I was one time when I walked up in a certain village, I'm the only white person, and I'm mixed, but to them I'm blonde and blue-eyed, and they all came up around me and started touching on me, and my friends said, yeah, they never saw they don't see white guys much. And so the women, when I'd walk up, they'd cover up their breasts because they were uncovered. They don't wear bras, or they're uncovered just working. And they would, when they saw me, and I tell my friend, like, why are they doing that? And he goes, well, because they know you're turned on by their breasts, and we're not.
Wow. That's crazy.
So, but where the story is going is, though, I was kind of a target for black magic, because I went to the capital of Voodoo, and I met the president of the Voodoo Society, went to his house, and the people I was staying with was the minister of arts and culture of a country in Africa there, Dahomey, Benin. And so I already knew to be careful. Like you're going into the heart of it, where they're all hexing each other. And of course they want to get a guy from America. You get a visa, or you can get some money, and everyone just thought I was a millionaire. You know what I was doing before I went to Africa? I was working at Little Caesars. To be honest, why not?
Right on, man. I did my Pizza Hut stint. You know what I mean? It's the best job in the world, right?
Amazing.
Where do you in that process? Can you get drugged? Can you get drugged and tricked, or can you get drugged and robbed?
Yeah, it happened to me. I was drugged, tricked, and robbed, all of the above.
Oh wow.
Yeah. In malaria, I got malaria each time, several times. And even though you could get thousands of dollars worth of shots, back then they forced you, even to get into the country. It was third on the list of the diseases. And I had to get $1,000 worth of shots that didn't work, obviously. And my African buddies told me that when they go home, they get sick. And then when they come here, they get sick. It's just different amoebas and parasites in the water. Nothing you could do about it. So, but my first time I was there, they took me to a bar to celebrate that night, like Welcome to Africa thing. And they're drinking beers, and the guy offers me palm wine. And he goes, oh, you're going to love this. And like, and it was really sweet. It's from the palm trees. And I only had a cup of it. And I remember we got up to leave, and they had to carry me. When I hit the door, I was passing out, and they were laughing. And so I was like, oh, that was my first night. So I'm like, I'm going to be careful. And so, and I was hanging out with the people that do the magic potions and stuff. So with the women, they're trying to do that to you. That's normal. That's what my buddy told me. Like, be careful of the women.
I saw a video. I'm trying to find it right now, and I don't know where it is. Maybe it was just not on YouTube. But they were like trying to get in with this tribe and hang out with them, and they were drinking it was like an alcohol mixed with cocaine. And it was like and the person was like, we drink this to keep the spirits off of us, the bad spirits. And I was like, damn, dude, this is some different shit over here.
That's wild. So we have a pretty cool question here that I think we can all kind of riff on. So Trent Little asks, the rod of Aaron turns into a serpent. Is it related? Is it euphemism? Ammon, do you want to start this off?
Yeah, why are they turning their rods into serpents in the first place? Why is it when everybody's look, in antiquity, when you get bitten by something, right? Or you get stung, or you get clipped by an arrow that's got a venom on it, and you got to go see somebody right away. You got to run to the person who has the knowledge of that viper. You got to run to that person. Those are the Bacchants. People don't think about it. Those Bacchants are perpetuating a very advanced pharmacology. That's why we find people with hallucinogens in their system. There's those crazy hallucinogens from the Bronze Age, right? So, yeah, that serpent, it's just because we're out of the context. To us, this is only an issue because we're not in the context, right? But for anybody, from Moses is holding up the serpent, dude, where was the guy trained, right? He's trained in Egypt with the best priests. He knows what he's doing. That guy is a drug. If you were to take Moses's hair, you'd find all kinds of drugs in there. Look what happened to the guy, right? He's the one whose glory emanated from him after seeing the presence, right? And being there. He made that temple. It wasn't a temple, it was a tent, but it was like a temple, and it drew that presence, a column of fire. Dude, so smoky, you got to pull those people out. That's there's Aaron's rod, right? Yeah, there's Aaron's rod. If you are Jewish and you think anything about the holy writings and the religion, because honestly, a lot of Jews don't. A lot of Israelis that I knew were like, I'm not going to say it, but F the religion. And I was like, really? That's, I'm sure, Neal, you probably traveled in certain circles, but all the Israeli soldiers that I've spent a year with over there, dude, they were so secular. They were just,
that's how Israel is now. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you were following the religion, you would know what that serpent was. You would know what that healing was. Yeah. So it's definitely there. Those drugs are there. Moses was a drugged out guy, man. He was a drugged out Satanist. Following Bronze Age Saturnian religion.
My new theory that I'm working on, it's a hypothesis, is that the characters of Aaron and Moses are somewhat inspired by the constellations Ophiuchus and Orion. And by the way, the Babylonian, there's a Babylonian version of Orion where Orion, it's his nick, and the name is Ur-Nammu, the light of the heaven. And so Ur-Nammu, he doesn't have a bow, he has a staff. And so also Gilgamesh is related to Orion too. So Gilgamesh is Orion basically.
And can I just say, Neal, can I just add, as soon as you start talking constellations, stars, moon, sun, all of a sudden you are in Bronze Age religion. This is right before everything that we're talking about with Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. You're in the pre-time, baby, right now.
Absolutely. And here's why I think that. Because number one, those two constellations are linked because they're like a pole. They're never seen in the sky at the same time. They're exactly on the opposite side of the heavens. So Ophiuchus and Orion are exactly opposite side of the spectrum. Ophiuchus has the serpent staff. He's the healer. Also, he's the son of Apollo, the lawgiver. And then, according to Eratosthenes, Apollo is there is no constellation of Apollo. But when they talk about Apollo in the sky, they just point to Ophiuchus. It's the same spot. So you have Ophiuchus being a lawgiver and holding up a serpent staff, Moses. Orion also holding up a staff like Aaron does. He's standing right in front of the bull, the calf. What does Aaron do in the text? He offers up a brazen calf. The Orion constellation is literally standing right in front of the calf. So I think there's something to be said there.
You could be very onto something. That's really interesting. I know, like, one thing when I think about Moses and stuff, like I was talking with Wretch about this on Occult Explorers the other day. It's like the 8th book of Moses and its connection to the Orphic tradition. Like, what's going on with this Museus character that you see coming up in these Orphic texts that then later Jews are correlating with Moses? Do you want to talk about anything of that, Wretch?
Well, I do have a few more things to add about the serpent staff there. I mean, there's definitely multiple layers to that. Even if there was I could see Moses actually using the snake venom. It comes up with like the brazen serpent and stuff. There's a lot going on there with Moses and serpents, but it's actually more important in Jewish apocryphal texts or other Jewish texts than the Old Testament than you might think. So it's actually often depicted as a sapphire serpent staff, and the staff of Moses is the same as the staff of Aaron. And we learn about it in the book of Jasher, and how Moses actually stole it from the Midianites by conning Jethro and getting his wife there. But it was placed in the Ark of the Covenant. It's still there's a variety of ways that symbol of a sapphire serpent could be interpreted, like as the Milky Way, or it seems to be actually plagiarized from the Egyptians and their blue serpent Wadjet, or Uraeus serpent with the wings there. It might actually be the prototype of even the caduceus. But there's a whole bunch of symbolism that could be pulled out of that, but it's certainly possible that he was using the venom too. So, or everything, like he was using everything else apparently. So
why would he Wretch? Can we really declare Moses a magus? Can we just get it out there and say, look, Moses and Jesus are both magi. They're both performing within this certain area. And the 8th book of Moses is full of the same sort of magic that you see throughout the Greco-Roman tradition. So there's not really a big leap between Moses the magus and Jesus the magus. We're talking about the same acts, right? I mean, Jesus is still boasting the fact that he's gonna bring you to the point that you could be exposed to these venoms and not have any problem with it, right? He's promising you the antidote right there. So do you think Moses, I mean, say we get his hair sample of Moses, right? Say we get lucky, and one of these, archaeologists says, hey, here's a sample. And we go ahead and test it, and he's full of the venoms, and he's full of the compound. He's got the burning purple in him. He's been getting it from those Phoenicians, right? That's where he's been getting it. He's full of drugs, man. This guy's a whew. What do we do when we find out Moses is a drugged out sorcerer?
Yeah, he's definitely a magician. I mean, this is just a matter of one, like what I was saying, one person's miracle is another person's magic, right? So
yeah, he's having a duel with the magicians in the court of
he's having a magical duel. And in the later occult texts, they don't make any bones about it that this is who they learned their magic from. They're calling it magic, and they're attributing it to Moses and other people. And they say Moses actually does it through the power of the serpent staff, more than like God doing it through him. He's saying it's actually the staff, and the staff has, in certain texts at least, has like the names of God on it by which you can do the magic, like a very Kabbalistic kind of view of things. But it's also kind of like chakras on the spine in a way, and you got to have the right mantras for it, or you bring it into the magic tent in to Hotbox in that Grand Key of Solomon,
by the way,
which is Islamic text there.
By the way,
part of Christian, Jewish, and Muslims all have veneration for the serpent staff of Moses, and as the way that he worked his magic.
By the way, that the idea of a magic staff comes from like stories of Bacchus having his thyrsus. Like you don't like Moses is the story of Moses. The first story that we have, well, actually, we don't even have it anymore. The first time someone mentions a story about Moses is from this Hecataeus of Abdera character who's living in Alexandria, Egypt. And it doesn't surprise me that, because people, and the reason why I'm bringing this up, people always ask, why does Moses need a staff? Why can't God just do this? Why does Moses have to have a staff? And all these other characters, like, they don't even need anything. Elijah didn't need a staff. But it's like, because the magic in the ancient world, the idea of like having a staff in your hand, the thyrsus, and doing miracles with it and performing rites with it, those are ideas that come from this ancient Greek Bacchic world. Ophiuchus, Bacchus, and they all had staffs in their hands. So I'm not surprised that Moses would have the staff in his hand if his story is coming out of Alexandria.
If Moses was anywhere near the magic from the time that he was in, he had a rod, and that rod was used to introduce the drug into the anus. We see it on the Greek side. So it's not, we shouldn't find it odd that these accoutrements are there, that they have these instruments, so cool.
Yeah, I was going to say that, right? Like the magic wand is really the alabastron, right? And they're talking about how they're administering these drugs and using it to fly. The riches are riding their broomsticks. They're using their magic wands. It's all euphemistic language. It's a very apparent when you look into the Norse ritual, because all of the Norse men do not want to engage in what they call ergi, women's magic, because it requires you to submit to the priestess. They don't tell you what exactly, but they say that you have to become effeminate and submit. And this is the worst thing for a Norse man to do, right? But that's the price if you want to engage in ergi,
Wow.
But, there was a really cool question, and this one I wanted to bring up because Ammon and I and Wretch and Dion, we'd all been talking about this recently on Discord, is the Pleiades. What are the ritual connections with the Pleiades?
Before I want to hear Ammon on this, but I just want to throw this out there because I was reading Thomas Paine the other day, and he said something that I never thought about. He said that the book of Job is considered to be the oldest book in the Old Testament. Most scholars agree on that. But it mentions Pleiades, it mentions Orion, it mentions the bear, and Thomas Paine is like, these are Greek constellations. He's like, this book had to have been Greek first. Now, Ammon, what do you think? Is that true?
Yeah. From the language itself. That's why I kept yelling at people saying, the more you read a Septuagint, the more Greek it gets. You can't deny the fact that this is a Greek story in colloquial Greek expressions. Yeah, and I think that's why waking people up with the children of earth and sky, the whole Genesis, I think that's important. And a lot of the concepts that you don't understand from the prophets, for example, those will come through on the Greek side. And they didn't know what the Masoretic Jews didn't know what to do with those texts. How do you have a centaur with a horse that's the size of the horse of a penis, right? How do you express
in the temple too?
And the Greek word for this dude is pederast, right? The one transferring the knowledge of the drugs to the elite aristocratic youth. Did they have those, Dion, in Africa? They probably didn't have the aristocratic youth getting their education, did they?
Well, in Africa, secret societies are really secret societies. They keep things very close knit, very tight together. And you are initiated as young boys or girls into these cults, and like it's male and female. It's very specific, and it's the different gods at that. They got a host of gods that almost connects to the Egyptian pantheon of gods. The Nigerian and the West African gods. I wanted to bring up something about, you're talking about the scepters in Moses in Egypt. There's various scepters that the pharaohs would work with. One, you have a uas, a scepter. That's a famous one that has the curved, it has a fork at the bottom with the head of Anubis at the top there, or Seth. And you also have something called the Jed Pillar, which is very famous, raising the Jed ceremony of the raising of the Jed Pillar, which is all over the pyramids and the walls of ancient Egypt there. And so it deals with snakes too. The cobra wrapping around these pillars, back in ancient Egypt. But some people propose it deals with electricity, electrical current.
Right.
Right. Well, the Jed is also explicitly the spine of Osiris. So there's all these hints at Kundalini-like practices in Egypt, but it's hard to really make out what the heck is going on there.
And I'm pretty sure if you were to put the medicated alabastron in the backside, you would feel the spike of energy going up your Kundalini, up your spine.
Yeah.
And that's what they talk about in Tantra and different rituals there.
Yeah.
What is it?
To your spine, and then it gets the power going, I guess. And
well, what is it? What is it? I'm sorry, Snappy. What is it with the this phallus of Osiris? What is it with that? Why do we always seem to come back in the cult to that phallus, right? The whole thing doesn't work without some kind of sexual
golden phallus
deal in it. What do you? I don't know.
When Osiris resurrects, the first part of his body that rises is his phallus, and the first thing that Isis does is become a bird. She turns into a bird, and she goes and flies and hovers over his phallus, takes his seed, so she jerks him off, and then that's how she gives birth to Horus.
That's exactly what Medea. That's exactly what Medea does to Prometheus. Exactly what Medea in Flaccus.
Oh my God, I got to look into that. That's crazy.
Going back to the Egyptian, it makes me think of the story of Atan, right? Who in order to have an other, he basically creates creation in order to have sex with it. You know, he manifests himself, and his hand is like the vagina, and then he takes his penis and he jerks off into the cosmic darkness, and he creates all of creation so that he can have sex with them. Right? You know, so it's like, it's so deep and intrinsic. And I also think just, you see this imagery everywhere of the vagina, vulva, and the phallus. Usually they're connected, right? And there's always all these rituals about having to raise the phallus, make the phallus come to life and give us its life-giving milk that's then transported into a receptacle. It's all about the sexual rights, you know, and understanding procreation.
And the agricultural layer within that too.
Yeah, this is also extremely important, because when we look at a lot of these agricultural myths, right, they really show all of the like, they show us like how much they understood the cycles and how they understood change. Like, I think this is absolutely paramount to understanding Bronze Age religion. They're connected to the death and rebirth cycles. They're breeding and changing crops and animals over time. You know, so they're understanding that things are evolving and are transforming, and they're trying to participate in this process. What they're understanding is ionic life, right? What they're understanding as ionic life is this whole like process, right? It's about seeing life from outside of time, you know, so that you can get that whole big picture, right? This is why it's such a corruption what the Christians do when they make it about immortality, because it destroys the entire cycle. You know, you can't have immortality. You have to die, you know, but what ionic life is seeing it from outside, seeing the whole cycle unfold, right?
Totally. I say here to that. That sounds like the Orphic hymns to me. And the great Eternitas, she who is beyond the ion, she who governs the ion. Somebody's going to figure out the physics of that someday, and I'm going to be able to transport myself right next to Dion, and he and I are going to have some kind of ceremony together. I don't know what it's going to be, but
you know what I noticed though is people throw this term out by accident, and they'll accidentally correctly define magic. Well, they'll say like, our band was playing that night, and the magic was happening. We were all hitting the notes. I'm like, that's the definition of magic. Like your will becoming realized in the world. Like you're trying to make this song as perfect as possible, and then it happens. Like all the pieces are put together, and you put together this amazing performance, and then you're sitting there going, "It was magic." Like, yeah, that's what yeah, it was. That's actually.
As a musician, as someone who deeply does this with percussion, and Dion can talk about this too, I think it's even more deep than that. It's almost a possession experience. When you get into the flow, you're no longer cognizant. You are literally in total communion and sync with the performers around you. It's like you're telepathically linked. When you're in a really good band and a really good jam session, you transcend everything and you're connected to everyone around you. The only other thing that does this is drugs, you know?
That's that mania, that frenzy, that Bacchic frenzy. In the church, they call it the Holy Spirit. But it's that possession. Nobody can figure out what that is. It's something that happens though. You know?
Like, have you ever had anything like that, Dion, where you felt like you were just taken by the music, you know?
100%. It's encouraged in all these different ancient cultures. And when you go study music in Africa, the Amazon, or any of the people I've studied music with, they encourage that. You know, what's ironic with my first couple years of music lessons, you know, I was studying Persian music, you know, Tombek, and my teacher spoke Farsi. And I was studying some other African rhythms, and I was having a hard time getting it, the syncopation of it. And he told me, all right, close your eyes. And he took my hands and he goes, let go, like relax your hands, let go limp. And he goes, you're gonna piggyback. He goes, I'm gonna play, and he played with my hands. He used my hands and played this weird rhythms. And I just was limp and let him do it until I finally got it. And he goes, what I've done is put it into your muscle memory. You know, and but the way in Africa they would do it, they wouldn't teach you like that. They just put you into a trance and you would automatically know how to do it. Because when I went to Africa to study that, I would ask them, well, how do you do it? You know, I was like, is there a technique? And they're like, no, my friend. Like, when the trance kicks in, they all know what to do.
Yeah.
That's kind of beautiful, right? And I think about this too, like when we look at like, one of the things I think we're having so much trouble when we're trying to study the Orphic text is that the music is so complicated and so removed, you know, like it's so hard to preserve music in an understandable form. And especially because they were trying to keep it secret, you know, so it's like, it's so hard for us to even get a decent understanding of what's going on. And it's beyond essential to the rites, right?
Can I say, Snappy, you and Dion came up with a show yesterday that made me queasy, right? I was queasy, but I was drawn. It was like, this is a necessary ill. It felt like going to an autopsy or something. You know what I mean? You don't like being there because somebody died, but at the same time, you're trying to figure out what happened. You guys were doing that yesterday with the semen stuff and the laying on of the boys. I think if you bring that culture forward a little bit, it's enough to kind of break us into the reality of what, you know, what actually happens. So I'm sorry. I just wanted to admit, kudos to you guys, by the way. Everybody out there, you should see this. It's sickening yet drawing and interesting at the same time. And where's the Pope?
No, I think like, yeah, you're getting, well, what's really important, one of the things that I want to do, and I think Dion's on board with those episodes, is kind of expose a lot of the extreme kind of insanity that's happening in a lot of these religious groups and a lot of these religious cults and what they're engaging in. You know, they're really, it's really about experiencing the all and entering into these extended states, and they're doing it through sex or through mutilation or through breaking of taboos, through pushing these boundaries. You know, that's where the real magic is kind of happening, is in these fringe states. When you're, you know, I always think there's this really interesting quote that by this philosopher Ludwig Klages. He says that all that is magic is wasteful. You know, real magic comes in the expenditure of stuff. You know, it comes in that sacrifice and in the actual waste of things. You know, you experience it when you are when you're destroying it. It's almost paradoxical. What do you guys think of that?
It's interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's different theories about how the magic works, and I think, you know, some modern scholars like to say that it's all transactional and that you're making a deal with the spirits, but a lot of it, especially with the pagans, is actually more about causality, and you burn the incense or make the offerings to produce a natural effect, which involves spirits, but it's not so much about bribing the spirits to do your will. There's plenty of spirits that'll do it willingly. They don't need a price or anything, really. They just want some attention, maybe. But this idea,
there's a whole class of demons out there, Wretch, that will have intercourse with you in ways that you would not even contemplate. Yeah, definitely. What is all that about, Dion? Come on, Dion. Dion, is it sex, drugs, and rock and roll? Please tell us about it.
And
yeah, it is in the ancient world. It is.
I was
what were you going to say there, Neal?
Pope, just look at his costume. He looks like a sorcerer. Like he is. He's a magician. Like Go ahead. I just wanted to throw that out there. Let's not.
Well, one thing I will say is we mentioned is Inquisition torture machines. You know, those crazy machines that they were hooking people up to and torturing them now has evolved into the modern BDSM culture. So these dark experiences through controlling them, and at first I thought that BDSM stuff was so crazy. Like, how could they be doing this? Because I saw it in the New Age community. Like, there's people that are yoga people, then they have another side. I'm like, oh, what's this? Kali? What y'all doing? And there's a therapeutic healing element to it when it's cognitive. When it's unconscious and subconscious, then it can take on your negative forms. That's where you get rape and hurting other people. When it's conscious, you're healing the trauma through your body, through pleasure and pain. The pleasure and pain is right up next to each other. And it's really what we're talking about is exorcism. Exorcism through sex. But it's not raping or forcing it onto somebody. In the BDSM culture, it's where you're taking it onto yourself or consciously doing it with the partner to dispel this dark energy.
In the ancient Sumerian world, there's a reason why when you just got laid, you feel good afterwards for a while, for a few days maybe. You're good. You're recharged. You're not depressed after that. There's a reason why people who haven't got laid in a long time are somewhat depressed sometimes. However, even the ancient world, they realized this, and in Babylon, they had the Temple of Ishtar, where the pornea was going down. This wasn't just a bathhouse. This wasn't just a place. This wasn't like a dirty bathhouse. This was a sacred religious experience, and the women weren't just like treated as like objects. They were praised for this was a sacred ritual that was part of their culture. And you had the Temple of Ishtar right next to the Temple of Marduk, and it was like two parts of this. It was like two equally important parts of the religion.
No, this is really interesting because you see a lot of this in parallels within Tantra, right? You have the right hand and the left hand. And the right hand is understood as Shiva, the phallus, the light. This is about austerity. These are these yogis who go out and they starve themselves and enter into that intense meditation, right? It's no different, though, than the Shakti Rights of the cave, which are sexual and drug-based. You know, one is about denying life. The other one is about affirming life. But in the end, the polar opposites get you to the same monadic center, right? It brings you back to that one. And this is why someone like the Buddha, he's so adamant about forming the middle path. And if you look at his story and you read it, he went down the right-hand path and he does the most intensive austerities to the point where he almost kills himself. And he talks about going into these ecstatic states of bliss while in these near-death states. You know, like it's the same as BDSM.
Yeah, I don't think it's any coincidence that those religions that hate sex are often the ones that teach you to leave Earth behind and they can't wait to die. You know, they have no connection to, they don't take pleasure in life, and so they want to die, you know, and their natural urge. It's like, I'm sorry, God, why for feeling these feelings that you created me to feel. It's like, why they got this weird guilt trip about having sexual desires. What is the most natural thing there could be? So, of course, they want to die.
A lot of it has to do with this weird manifestation of power, right? They feel like if they can control their libido and their sexuality, that they can, you know, that they're these god men, that they've enacted a siddhi. But the reality is 99% of them can't control shit. They all turn into creeps, you know?
Yeah.
Or they control it through brutal, like, governments and inquisitions and shit. So they use force because they can't convince people through philosophy or rationality to convert. They have to convert by force. Is the only way it seems to happen, or through power and money. So, or even pharmakia sorcery, probably. It's how they make converts.
I got interviewed one time by a dominatrix who is a high value, you know, high price dominatrix, and her thing was handcuffing businessmen and sodomizing them. And she said this is a very common kind of therapeutical direction that they take. There's something in the process of forcefully restraining those driven business people and sodomizing them that brings them back to a, I don't know, is it some kind of quantum something? Dion, what is that?
They do that. That's normal in the corporate world. It's because imagine you're going 40 hours screaming and yelling at people, complete alpha. And in order to get that release, you have to go submissive. And you don't want somebody bigger than you. You want somebody smaller than you. That's why you're saying it's a female. Sometimes it could be a small little female at that. And they need a release that's the opposite of what they're doing on a daily basis. It puts them into a different state. And it's ironic. Why did they put the G-spot there? Can y'all answer that one? I mean, you're all with this fancy magic and all these world travels. Well, why? How did that happen?
It was God's plan. He wanted you to have, he wanted you to engage with that kind of sexual stuff, man.
Herodotus says that in Babylon, the women had to attend the temple of Ishtar and agreed to have sex with any male that asked her. Once she performed this ritual, the male had to give money to donate to the temple. Scholars have called this sacred prostitution. Herodotus, however, is unreliable. Yeah, so I guess there's some nuances here, but like you can see in the sources that they're talking about this stuff, even in Herodotus' time.
Also on the island of Cyprus, you can, in the celebration of Adonis, you can either shave your head, or if you want to keep your hair, you can go to the temple where you offer yourself. And any passerby, stranger can choose you out. And it's a harbor, right? Any stranger can choose you out. And that's considered your service of Aphrodite,
right,
for that year. So, we know that the wife has no constraint from her family whatsoever. She has to go out and render this service. So, I've always wondered, what did it do for these? Because it was very successful. It seemed to be a healthy institution. What does it do for the women who then, you're married to somebody and their marriage years are 20 years difference. You're like 15, marrying a 35-year-old. Now you're 40 and you've got an old man for a husband. And thank goodness over the years you've done your service to Aphrodite, and it's kept you in a place that is healthy. I mean,
it makes me think of these like Sumerian priest women you hear about. There was a whole class of these women who basically they would live these lives where they were like celebrities, and men would come and give them gifts, and sometimes they'd offer sexual favors. Most of the times they were engaging in conversation or going on dates. But some of these women were so powerful, they were heading up entire political parties and exercising all kinds of control. And this is something a lot of modern scholars don't understand, because they say, oh, the men have the real power and the authority, but they're all going to these women and simping for them, who are telling them what to fucking do,
Yeah, that's actually, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because there's a lot of very powerful women throughout history that had in some cases, more power over kings and emperors at some points. Like Livia or Julia Augusta after the death of Augustus. She was more powerful than Tiberius, who was the new emperor. She would tell him what to do. You know what I mean?
The oracle at Delphi dictates what everyone thinks in the Mediterranean world. When she comes out and says Socrates the smartest person, the whole world flips out, right? Like, think about that kind of power, right? Why are we dismissing them?
Yeah.
Yeah, when you said they're planning the laws there, right? Yeah, these are the women doing it. I want you to notice with the Greek oracles that whenever somebody wants to go to war or they want to send out a colony, they go to the oracles. The oracles tell them where they can and cannot build civilization. They tell them who can and cannot attack each other. So amazing power from this. It's not, I wouldn't even call it matriarchal. I would call it an oracular female power. Yeah, I can't dictate. Even the Romans, every time they get into a bad situation, what do? They go and run to the books, the Sibylline books, and they open them up and say, "What's the instruction here? Let's find out where we are." Oh, they said to do this, and that this would happen.
Or in desperation, they do the sorties themselves, right? And they bust out Virgil. We have a couple emperors who do that. But yeah, this stuff is it's so interesting and it's so wild. But I really wanted to kind of bring it back. We had that question about the Pleiades, and this is an interesting one because in anthropology, I remember when I was studying that in university, this is widely considered one of the oldest mythological stories. Like we have the oldest version we have is the Australian Aboriginal version, which is some of the old, like based upon the star descriptions that they give in their oral tradition. This takes it back like to some of the earliest migrations out of Africa, you know, that they have the Seven Sisters myth. So what do you guys know about this? Like Wretch, have you come across any stories about the Pleiades?
Well, the Pleiades definitely come up in various places, but it's hard to, I can't think of too many rituals specifically. It's a good marker for the seasons and times of years according to where the culture is. When the Pleiades rises, that's when you start to, the bees start to make the honey, according to Pliny. So that's a good marker. That's an important ritual marker.
Yeah, it's followed by the dog star. And
the dog star. Okay.
Followed by once that dog star rises, the Egyptians knew we're going to get our first rain of the year now. This is it.
Right.
Time to celebrate.
There's also the Taurus. Taurus is involved with the honey, and the Pleiades are found in
same
Taurus.
part of the sky. Yeah, Orion, Taurus, Pleiades, and the dog star. It's all in the same little area, basically.
So it depends on the particular culture. It's going to be different seasons, right? But
yeah.
And then I know there's that missing one because I know in the Greek this is Mariope, and what's the deal with that? You know,
6 visible, 1 invisible, 7 stars in one right hand.
Wow. And you know what I realized? The Pythagoreans had this number as the most sacred number, 7. Everything they did was with 7 times. You have Apuleius talking about being dipped in the water and being basically baptized 7 times in the water. And he said, because of Pythagorean fame, he says. And then you have in the Deuteronomy, they're talking about the high priest slaying the bull and saying, taking the blood on the hands of the priest and sprinkling it 7 times on the horns of the altar. So that's 7. That number 7 pops up everywhere, and you have to wonder: is it Pleiades? Because Pleiades, look up at the sky. Look at Pleiades at night. It's so beautiful.
You also have the Hesperides, though, the ones that are on the opposite pole that are surrounding the Big Dipper, and then you have the 7 planets. Remember, in antiquity, you have the 7 planets plus the moon and the Earth, which make 9, but like Orpheus uses a 7-string lyre to play the music of the spheres, right?
You have to, it makes you, and then after that point, you have to wonder. They're seeing this number all over the sky, all over the place in nature. It's got to be sacred at that point. Like that's, you know what I mean? Like 7.
On the drug side, it's the 7 venoms that form the heart of the communion.
Wow.
That communion is the communion of Ophiuchus.
No way. I got to get into this. I got to read that stuff, man. You guys send me that link.
You know, Neal.
I'm telling you, it's Nero stuff. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, well, what I was going to say, Neal earlier brought up about how when the first rains come in the Nile, that deals with the dog star, septet. It also deals with the induation of the Nile. And what would happen is the Nile floods.
Right.
And all the silt goes to the side, and it makes it fertile for them to plant for the year.
Because it finally would rain at that time. Yeah.
Right. But also another thing that happens is the crocodiles come out. That's when they go up on shore, and that's Sobek. And when they would sacrifice the crocodiles, they would take the fat, and that's the original fat that they used for anointing was the crocodile fat to anoint the pharaohs.
Wow.
And also what you're talking about with the Pleiades there in Egypt. So we know that the 3 great pyramids are a mirror image of Orion. You know, you can see that clearly. But there's also the Pleiades has a layout somewhere on the Nile. I just can't remember all the temples that are connected in the 7 Sisters, because a lot of the things in the sky mirror into the Egyptian temples.
Oh yeah, there's that famous ancient proverb, as above, so below.
Yep.
The priesthoods were always like, if you the design of the temple was always designed on the sky. So the priesthoods were always trying to mimic the heavens and say, if we mimic the heavens, we'll be like gods. We'll be blessed. Like, so they're building their structures based on what they see in the sky. They're building their temples based on what they see in the sky, and doing their rituals the same way.
It's just like, I know the Sphinx is equated with the star sign of Aquarius, right? And we'll actually, like, the morning sun will point right at it too.
I bet.
We can see that the some Gnostics were talking about like ascending to the heavens past the Pleiades. I think it's in the Nasines again, with the Ophiuchus is involved there too. But I found the part in Pliny for the Pleiades, so I'll just quote a little bit about in regard to bees. Either seasons or else climates have changed, or previous writers have been mistaken. They go into retirement after the setting of the Pleiades and remain in hiding till after the rise, so not till the beginning of spring, as writers have said. And nobody in Italy thinks about hives before the bean is in flower.
See,
so it's all connected to various markers of nature and when things go into
exactly
bloom or
they had it mapped out when they can look at
animals are mating.
Yeah, they can look at. Go ahead.
So they'll do the rituals in according with, to help the animals mate better or to bring the crops in or whatever it is. So there's lots of layers there for sure.
These people had it mapped out. They can trace the sky and figure out what time of the year it is. What's gonna, like, they had this like calendar up in the heavens basically. They also had stories up there. Like, oh, there's that constellation. Here's the story that, Zeus placed this constellation up there. Athena put that one over there, and that's the story of blah 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 blah. And they had this. Their scripture was in the sky. It's kind of fascinating to think about that.
It must have been even better under the influence of the compound drugs that they were using, both plant and animal, to be able to look at Asterion, that Pleiad, that invisible Pleiad, who is the carrier of that light of the star. That Asterion means the
starry faced, right?
The starry ops. Yeah, you can translate that as face, or you can translate it as expression. They looked at it as that which comes off of you when you're looking at somebody right in the face. That thing that comes off of you and reaches them, that's your ops, your gaze. And that's the heart of Bronze Age Saturnian religion. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that everybody's like, what are the snakes about, right? When that healing God is the very central, that's the son of dawn, baby, right? We're talking about we're talking about the coming of dawn. And you cannot separate the Bacchants from this type of movement. It's all part of the, I think it's Pulaskian. I think it goes all the way back prehistory to Pulaskian.
Well, it's so important, right? If we're taking this again from that stellar theological kind of perspective, right? Venus is the brightest star in the sky. What do you see when there's an eclipse? We just had that hybrid eclipse. Venus was bare for everyone, the brightest thing. But this would have freaked out our ancestors,
What I noticed, though, is that oftentimes Zeus is credited for like putting the constellations up, but like every time Lucifer is mentioned in any of the Latin text, it's always something to do with ordering the heavens. So it's like, which one is it? Every time Ovid mentions Lucifer or Lucretius or whoever it is, any of these ancient Latin writers, they're always, every time Lucifer is mentioned, it's always Lucifer is ordering the heavens. Lucifer ordering the heavens. So you have this idea, and then like back to what Ammon said, if Lucifer's ruling the heavens and ordering the heavens, and then you have this secret knowledge about Hades actually being a Chthonian aspect of Bacchus secretly, then you're like, who's the real ruler? It's this Bacchus in underground and Lucifer in the heavens. And you had this, one of them is ruling the heavens, one of them is ruling the underworld.
Yeah, and it's important too, we connect this with that Kronos, that Ionic Kronos figure, because he's also described as the one who initiates time, right? By separation, by dividing the universe, right? By taking that power from Uranos and separating everything out. So it's the same kind of action. I've always seen this, right? Like if you look at Kronos, Dionysus, and Lucifer, they're all kind of interconnected, kind of the same energy in different forms, right?
And the Christian,
Yeah, I would add Hades. Add Hades to that list.
I said Hades, and Hades having that Chthonian aspect of Bacchus. That's what I said.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, to my list for sure, you want to add Hades too, because right, like there's also that understanding when you look at the Kronos myth, what happens? He's stripped of his authority in on Earth, but he's given authority over the underworld, right? He's bound in Erebus. But there's these rites, right? I was reading Macrobius, and they talk about this where they take during the Saturnalia, they take the deity and they would literally unbind him. They'd have these woolen chains that they would take off.
Yeah.
And then he would go around and distribute and give everyone gifts, and his whole nature would change.
This is why the idea of the Christian devil is just everything that they think is pagan is the devil. And this is why that's why Saturn's so central. That's why Lucifer becomes the name of Satan later on. That's not an accident. That's a natural response of calling Lucifer the one who orders the heavens, and so you have and so the what was I going to say? Oh, and Saturn. People think Saturn is like just gets replaced by Zeus, and that's the end of him. If you read the Orphic text, he goes down and he gets a section of Hades allotted to him called Elysium. Now, what's Elysium? Elysium's the best part of Hades. It's basically heaven. It's where all the good people go.
Yeah, that's where Achilles winds up, right?
Yes, Saturn is actually the ruler of heaven, basically.
Yeah.
So as above, Lucifer ordering the heavens, like in all the texts say, and below Saturn ruling the heavens and the underworld. So it's really crazy, and the Christians knew this. The Christians knew that this was their dual opposite.
Yeah, a lot of people kind of see a connection between Saturn and Satan, but for the Greeks and Romans, Saturn was not evil. He wasn't like the boogeyman, and
never was.
Even in like just yesterday, I was reading Plotinus Enneads, and it's talking about Kronos in a very positive way, and then also in the Orphic tradition and or Saturnalia sounds like a great holiday.
He rules the golden age. He rules the golden age.
Yeah,
exactly. But you know what it is that the Christians, they dumb everything down into this simplistic, single lifetime, black and white, monotheistic ridiculousness where it's just childish, and they misunderstand. Like Kronos is a terrifying figure because he is the Reaper, right? He stands behind you with the knife saying, adapt or you die, right? Or you get destroyed and get reborn anew. But they understood death and violence very differently. This is not the Christian understanding, right? Kronos is not a figure of evil. He's a figure of transformation who initiates that cycle, who keeps us evolving, who prevents stagnation, right?
Yeah.
Jesus as a child trafficker was putting children into the death state in order to burn off their mortality. And we have examples of this when he shows up in the cemetery and the kid's like, I love you. And he's like, I want to be with you. And he's like, all right, here's tell you what you got to do this. And we get a lot of that stuff you guys were talking about, right? That death state is integral. Modern Christianity is nothing, absolutely nothing of the operation of the original mystery. Standing in church, I'm going to say this just as a rational historian. I'm not a historian, I'm a classical philologist. As somebody who looks at these texts, I can tell you for a fact, the operation of the early Christian mystery was nothing to do with standing in a church, walking down an aisle and taking a piece of bread that is magically transformed in your mouth. It has nothing to do with that. And I think Christians today, if they were to saw it, if you could take us back, Dion, get somebody to make a movie to take us back into this time period to show what that original mystery was, so that evangelicals and Catholics alike will watch it and their mouths will be open and they will see for the first time, they'll see this is what your mystery is. This is where you come from. I want to see that kid arrested. I want to see that kid arrested with Jesus. I want to see that kid arrested with Jesus. I want to see what that scene played out. I want to know why Jesus is yelling. He's yelling at the Roman soldiers that are coming to arrest him. He's saying, well, you didn't need those weapons, right? I'm not a child trafficker. And off runs the little naked boy that's with him. I want to know what, we can do to show the reality. How do we show Dion, how do we show the world this reality? How do we make the mystery known?
Wow. Well, talking about putting boys in the oven, Jesus does that as a child in the Syriac infancy gospel. He puts boys in the oven. They're afraid of him. There's multiple stories in the Syriac infancy gospel. They're afraid of him. The kids hide from him. And in one of the stories, he puts them in the oven. And we also know other different peoples throughout history have been put in ovens to burn off their immortality. Is that Dionysus was put in an oven?
Like that redheaded kid in the Codex Waloani, they roast him over the coals, right? And then collect his blood. The witches collect his blood and combine it with the gem out of the brain of that guard. Yeah. Oh God.
I think about Wretch in his book on magic carpets. The opening picture, right, is a guy who's in a suffumigation box over fire. Isn't that right?
Yeah. And then there's also stories of Abraham being stuck into a furnace by Nimrod, and the flames don't hurt him or whatever. And so there's a recurring theme there for sure. Huh.
What do you think about Mary and the being fed in the temple? Is that some kind of reference to the fumigations? Because it says she's in the very central part of the temple, the Atan. She's in the innermost part. So she'd be partaking of whatever it is that they're partaking. Do you think Mary was getting high as well? Do you think that was is that a part of our whole, cult?
I would think it has to be. If she's in the identa, they don't let just anybody in there. And even the high priest is only supposed to go in there at like Yom Kippur or whatever to spread the blood. So, or what, very rarely do they go in there. So if they're bringing in women in there, that one fact alone changes everything modern people think they know about their religion. It has nothing, and the role of women in that early religion. It turns everything upside down. Just that one fact.
Exactly. What's that thing that she's being nourished with, according to the Gospel of James, which is in Greek? I looked at the Greek. There's no question about it, right? It's not metaphorical at all. It says that Mary was raised in the temple. And as soon as she turns 12, they start they're going to give her off to somebody, right? And guys all come in. All these old creeps come in with their rods that they're going to give them, and they draw lots for her, right? And that's how Joseph gets her. And he's like, I don't want her. What are you doing? I'm an old dude, and she's a virgin, right? What it says that she's fed in the temple. Imagine that. If these highest of high priests are only able to get in there once a year, what are you doing with girls inside there? What is that college of priestesses doing? I mean, dang, that's as pagan as it gets, people.
It must be connected to Ashura or something originally, or Kadesha, these temple prostitutes. But there's also these homosexual temple prostitutes, and so it goes on and on. And
the homosexual prostitutes are related to the dog star and stuff. There's all this weird stuff that is left in the text, but has been twisted and
they're called dogs themselves because of how they have sex. So
right.
Do you mind if I share a couple of slides real quick? I just want to lay something out real quick for some people.
Yeah, share away. Let's see.
All right. First of all, I just want to show people what I mean by Lucifer ordering the heavens. Ovid's Metamorphosis describes Lucifer ordering the heavens, and he says that all these constellations and the heavens basically is set by Lucifer, right? So you have that, but that's just, I just want to put that before I show this. Then there's the underworld. This is where the ancients believe that you go when we die, and this is the map of the underworld. This is Hades. Up on top, this is called the Blessed Isle, Elysium. And you're like, what is that? What's going on there, right? Well, turns out, if we actually look at what the ancients are saying, what the sources are saying, according to Homer, Elysium would be called the Fortunate Isles. Pindar and Hesiod both say that Kronos is the ruler of heaven. That's correct. That's what happens if you actually look at the Orphic hymns, that's who, after Cronus leaves heaven, he goes down to the underworld and he rules the Blessed Isle. And turns out, what is the Blessed Isle? Pindar describes it perfectly. The good receive a life free from toil. They're going back to the Golden Age, not scrapping with the strength of their arms nor the water of the sea for the sake of poor sustenance. But in the presence of the honored gods, those who gladly kept their oaths enjoy a life without tears, while the others undergo a toil that is unbearable to look at. Those who have preserved 3 times on either side to keep their souls free from wrongdoing follow Zeus's road to the end, to the Tower of Cronus. See, Cronus rules there, where ocean breezes blow around the Isle of the Blessed and the flowers of the gold are blazing, some from splendid trees on land while waters nurture others. With these wreaths and garlands of flowers, they entwine their hands according to the righteous counsels of, this is a king from the ancient Greece, whom the great father, the husband of Rhea, whose throne is above all, keeps the close blessed as it. So look, this idea of a heavenly realm that you go for the good people who keep their oaths, who aren't lying, has nothing to do with your faith. Oh, if you had faith in Saturn, you come here. It doesn't say that. It's saying the good people go here. And so this idea of heaven and hell and all this stuff, this is where it all comes from, guys.
Yeah, right? Don't the Orphics teach people about the passwords to get through the different gates? How you're supposed to cross the river Styx? How you have to pay the ferryman? How you have to have the right things written on your head? You know?
Amo can tell us about that, right, Amo?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, you can circumvent the whole deal, man. You got to stay away from where the crowd goes, right? Because here's what's going to happen, right? And you're like, what? And they're like, shut up, it's analog. Okay, so here's what's going to happen. They will come. You'll see the crowds there. See the crowds waiting, and they're pushing and shoving and pushing towards this water. And it's the water of forgetfulness, so don't go there. So the secret that we know is that you change your direction and you walk as far as you can off in the distance, in the dry distance.
And by the way, when you get there, you're so parched, you just died. You're so parched that it's really hard not to drink that water.
Right. It's a driving thirst, right? But you press on through that desert till you come to the guardians. There'll be guardians. Just take my word for it. People guarding. What they're guarding is another river, right? And that's the river of memory. You want to go to that. So keep your thirst off of Lethe. Right? Don't drink when it's your impulse to drink. Hold it and then go to memory. And once you have memory, then you've broken the cycle, right? You're now outside the system. And that whole mystery initiation is about taking you outside the system so that when you come back and enter the system, doing things to affect the system is not odd to you, right? It's the birth of a magus. It's the birth of somebody who's seen that. And you only get that through the initiation, which there is none left in the modern, in any of the modern monotheistic, fundamentalistic sects of ancient mystery.
I think it was Plato who said that there were some ancients, initiates in the ancient world, who had remembered their past lives because they did this process over and over again.
Yeah, it's just quantum physics, right? It's just quantum physics.
And then eventually you end up not stopping. Eventually you reach a level of apotheosis, and they're not gonna allow you to go back into the world anymore. You have to stay at Elysium. You are a god now. You've reached gnosis. You're done. You can't go back to the world. You have exited the realm of reincarnation.
Yeah, you're returning back to the monad, right? You go back to the cosmic egg and then to the womb to wait for the end of the time cycle when everyone else will eventually rejoin us in the one,
You know who does go back? You know who does jump back into the pool? It's all of those people like Jesus, right? It's all of those people like Jesus who want to be able to exhibit control within that environment, right? People don't realize outside of this system, Jesus is a wanted criminal right? He's a dude who was arrested in a public park with a naked kid at the top of a child trafficking scheme that involved drugs. Yeah.
You profane
Drugs
the
will show us. Drugs will show us everything, man. There are you can't listen, you evangelicals out there. You can't take his fingerprints off that boy. You can't do that. I'm sorry, but Jesus was touching that boy in the park. He was
profane the
touching that
mysteries,
boy.
right?
Yeah. So the secret of magic that the Christians won't tell you is that actually magic is possible because humans are divine in ourselves. We have a spark of the divine, depending on how you want to think of that. And after initiation, you realize that, and so you can work magic.
Yep.
Exactly. And what a lot of these Christians won't tell you is that all of this is necromancy, right? All of the deities are these ancient beings, primordial beings that have already gone through these cycles, right? So when Lucifer comes and tells you that they're going to show you the way how to become a god, how to become like them, they mean it. And when the God of the Christians, Jehovah, is telling you he wants to confuse your language to prevent you from becoming like him, he means that, you know?
Right. And every evangelical watching just said, see, they're Satanists. I told you they're Satanists. They're doing what, and they're exactly right. It is why he said, your Jehovah's a liar, ma'am. I'm sorry, but you take this stuff and your eyes will be open. And she was like, okay, right. And he drew her in and she opened her eyes. Next thing you knew, she was naked. She was naked, right? Oh, why do you think she was naked? People, Eve and Adam got on some kind of substance that made them get naked and do things that Jehovah thought were nasty. Yeah, fantastic. Oh God, it
became the beast with two backs. But yeah, but like when I think about the whole essence of Christianity, to me, it's trying to stop time. It's trying to maintain a type of perpetual order. It wants to subvert all of the physics of the universe. They don't want to have to be held accountable for their crimes or their actions. They don't want to die and be reborn. They want to maintain their patriarchal hegemony. That's the greatest sin imaginable in paganism. To resist transformation, to resist time, that's the only thing that Kronos will kill you for.
That's true.
It's just nature, man. It's just nature.
Yeah. So they want to end time. They want to bring about the apocalypse, and they want to end life on this planet, so that everything will be dead.
It's anti-Gaia. It's going against your mother, your Gaia.
Well, that's who Satan is, right? Who is Satan really? People always ask this, and I don't like to tell them, but that's who they're talking about. They're talking about Gaia. Who's Lucifer's mother, right?
Well, that's the
entheogens.
Yeah, that's the three layers that we're talking about. Lucifer, order in the heavens, Gaia, earth, and then Saturn in the underworld. That's it. That's your three layers of Satan right there.
You notice we have our three genders too, right? You get your bigendered, your female, and your male.
Yeah, there is no getting to any of the mystery without a bigendered entity. Definitely.
Phanes.
Or Dionysus, right? Who's the reflection of Phanes in our current reality, who shows us how to reassemble and go back, right? And this is the paradox that people don't understand, right? What at the heart of the Orphic rite is that sporagmos, where you're ripped apart. Why is the saint Orpheus ripped apart and turned into a head? This is a good thing, because in that moment he experiences the all and he's transformed into everything. You know,
I've been wondering.
Bionic life.
I've been wondering if the Christian martyr cult is sort of adopting that mentality. The Orphic, like going.
It's coming out of it. It's a perversion of it. You know, where right. They're trying to shift worship from the gods and from the spirits to just their ancestors. You know, to just their designated few, right? Like Wretch talks about this a lot. He's got some really good ideas.
Well, like Jesus is a solipsist. He thinks he's the only one who's divine, and everybody else is just, like it says in Genesis, Adam was made from the clay, and there's nothing divine about us. And so he's the only God, and everybody has to worship him. So it's this narcissistic solipsism. And the Valentinians also say that Abraham is or at least according to the heresiologists, they say that Abraham was insane and he thought he created the universe and he's the demiurge. So it's like Abraham was initiated and then he had this bad trip and he had a solipsistic time and he thought he was the only one that was divine, and now he has to like convert everybody to death cult and start cutting penises and doing all.
What about his
Yeah,
idea of what about his idea of the kingdom of heaven being within you? I think that's
right.
something,
Well,
you know, that
the Gnostics could interpret it in a way that all humans are divine, but you know, they also wanted to leave Earth behind and life on this planet. So
I think, like, again, like they're doing something similar to the Orphics, right? They're trying to induce this possession, but the possession is a very different kind of possession. They want you to give up your reason. They want you to submit to their will. So if you, like, when I was involved in a lot of these Christian rituals and stuff, they mirror the pagan rituals, but they enslave you. They mentally enslave you and they break you down, but it's the same kind of magical processes. It's the same kind of incantations and hymns and what, you know, we were saying the Jesus prayer, constantly invoking ourselves as sin itself, right? Like, how fucked up is that? You know, when you equate yourself with the problem, like, this is how much they're trying to separate you from Christ. In order to become Christ-like, you have to deny your entire deity. You have to accept that you are everything that's wrong with the universe, and you have to take responsibility for it. I'm not responsible for the universe. Like, fuck that shit.
Yeah, I didn't get arrested with a naked kid in a public park at 4 a.m. either, right? So I don't want that credit, Jesus. Thank you very much. What do you do with Marge Taylor Greene, MTG? What do you do with her? When she was in New York, Snappy, and remember her bodyguard was around her or whatever they are. I don't know if she's got Secret Service or what, but she had a group of armed guards around her with everybody around her yelling, "Oh my God." And the stuff you were hearing, it was all I got so excited for a minute because I thought, oh my God, I'm watching a Roman parade, right? I'm watching the people who were there to preserve the holiness, the polytheists who are there to preserve the sanctity of Rome, are there yelling at her, get out of New York. We don't want you. And awful things about who she is and then she comments about the zombies, the cannabis smoking zombies that are rising up against the Christians. It's almost like magic and reality are kind of blending, no?
Yeah, well, remember during COVID, Trump brought out this doctor from Africa who said that the virus was spread by sperm demons, actually, and homosexuals and all these things. So this craziness, it's a death cult, and
really is.
She talks about Jew lasers, that woman. How can anyone take her seriously? Like, there are conspiracies, and then there's that kind of shit. Like, what is that?
If Israel has space lasers, I hope they use it on her, you know? Like, take her out. Please, Israel.
It's so absurd, but you're right. You know, we're seeing this. There's this moment of this extremification that's happening, right? Where, like, these two sides are becoming so polarized, like, where you're seeing it, like, you can have no disagreement on either side, and then they're both so extremified and they want to see each other as like the absolute evil. It's become like this cartoon show. Like, I mean, you know, being queer, I see a lot of these parallels with you when you look back at like the gay rights movement, like that was happening in the 70s and the 80s with like that Anita Bryant character. If anyone watched the recent ContraPoints video, go watch that. Because that'll show you a lot of what's going on right now with this extremification. Oftentimes when things start to get good for a marginalized group, the freaking crazies come out to try and shut it down. And they want to protect the children. They're always yelling about they're trying to confuse your minds, They're trying to manipulate you. They play on things that we're all passionate about, that we all care about, to exploit and attack the most vulnerable, you know? Right now, there are over 500 bills in the US against trans people. 500, you know?
So that's what that's what they called it in Greece and antiquity. They call that corrupting the youth.
Yeah. The Abrahamic religions need constant scapegoats to explain why life in their culture is so shitty, you know, and why God is always punishing, why their tyrant is always flipping out about this or that. And,
and when you look and you listen to these people,
if you allow gay people, then hurricanes happen, apparently. That's how it happens. That's his number one thing. God just hates the butt sex, and he's going to send hurricanes if you don't cut it out.
It's so ridiculous. You ever notice almost all of these people who express these extreme bigotry, right? They come from two places. They're either people who have suffered extreme abuse, and so they're so oppressed they kind of lash out at marginalized people who scare them, who they can step down on, or they're perpetrators of the shit themselves, right? You notice that all these people yelling about the trans stuff are the groomers. they are, you know, they are the Baptist preachers, right? If you really want to talk about protecting children, why aren't we talking about guns? Why aren't we talking about the Baptists? Like,
you know how many times that, an article has dropped where there is a pastor? It's not just the Catholic Church, but it's the Catholic Church a lot. But a pastor or a priest who was formerly on camera talking about how, you know, the gays are trying to get your children. And then all of a sudden, a month later, they're in the news for like touching a kid. How often does that happen? It happens like literally like once every couple months. You see that.
Didn't that happen to the governor of Tennessee recently, or maybe it was a lieutenant governor who was passing the anti-trans bill, and he was involved in something?
Yeah, he was on Twitter. Commenting.
I can't even keep track of it all. There's so much of it,
He was on Twitter commenting and liking this I don't know who it was, but it was somebody who was like, it was like, yeah, you're sexy, I love you. Like, it was like you're, and it was like, what is going on? Like, it's so ironic.
This is what happens when you try to pray away the gay. It just doesn't work.
That's what it is. They hate themselves.
They're denying reality, you know? When you do this kind of mental stuff and you just torture yourself, you're going to lash out and hurt those around you, right? It's normal, right? So all of these people are just these PTSD, self-abused, angry people who are afraid to be themselves and to have any sort of fucking passion in any kind of regard, because to be passionate about anything is to be a sinner, you know?
Right. It's this
except for Jesus. You can want to have sex with Jesus. That's okay.
There's a deep S&M trip within Christianity in particular, and self-flagellation and all the, you know, atoning for sins through pain, because that's how you learn lessons, apparently. You don't have to actually, you know, become a better person just on the inside. You just hurt yourself until you feel sorry, I guess. I don't know.
So is Snappy carrying the burden? Do you have to, Snappy, do you have to enter into a place of freedom now that spirit is out there? Just like that spirit that drove, that good spirit that drove Marjorie out of New York City, is just kind of like purified it, you know, of her presence. Is that the same thing that is coming, that you feel coming to the surface, that complete freedom to fight against? It's that Bacchic. Like, do you feel that you are a modern day Bacchant?
100%. Like, that's been like, this is something I've noticed throughout my whole life is the more I've accepted myself, the more it's taken me down that path, right? And the more you learn to accept and appreciate world, and these monotheisms, they want to reduce everything down to black and white. They don't want to allow nuance. They don't want to allow any expansion. You know, as soon as I started to get into this kind of stuff, my entire world opened up, you know, and it began with an exploration. What is really evil? What are they calling evil? You know, for me, I really wanted to understand violence. And I did a lot of meditation. I did a lot of reading about violence, which is what brought me to Saturn and brought me to these pagan interpretations, because they're the ones who were able to put it in a cosmic approach and understand it as this tool for evolution and for change, you know? And it's like, for the first time, things started to make sense. It wasn't about reduction, about this personal narcissistic approach to salvation. That's what all these Christians are doing, you know? They're reducing everything. It's
You got to help them out, I guess, right? Because they're kind of victims, right? Sitting in their pews, listening to their reinforcement of some pretty
that's
harsh
what
stuff.
Wretch and I are trying to do now. We're starting another show here on Drawing Down the Stars, where it's called the Witches Guide to Realities, or Chaos Witches Guide to Realities. And the idea is we want people to understand that you can take back your spirituality. You know, you can approach it from a perspective of reason. You can go out and try things. You can go do the entheogens, see what works for you, throw away what doesn't work. Approach this like a scientist. You know, journal and chronicle what you're doing and make it about, and take it back for yourself. You know, that's what magic is. Like we were saying at the beginning here, it's that personal, spiritual experience. You know, you can have that and it's valid, and you can take these things from everywhere and create something for yourself, you know?
Yeah, if your spirituality isn't unique to you, then you're probably just following orders and doing lip service. That's all you're really doing. And that's not going to raise your consciousness in any way. That's the opposite, really. So
to me, like really being involved in this is about being an artist. You know, we're trying to connect to these spirits, and you do that through this artistic connection. Like we're visualizing these beings, you know, in our mind's eye. We're in their totality, not just the sense of sight, but all senses, you know? And then we're trying to connect to them in the song and then through speech, and you're trying to invite them into your everyday life. You know, it's like this active participation. That's what I want people to get out of it. Don't just listen to what I'm saying. Go and try it for yourself. You know, you'll be surprised with what works. I'm telling you.
You are the Antichrist, man.
It's not hard to be the Antichrist, you know. Just stop letting yourself be dictated. You know, don't fall for that shit.
The word heresy is derived from the root to meaning to choose. So a heretic is just somebody who chooses for themselves what they want to believe and what makes sense to them, rather than just blindly following orders. That's all it is. So I definitely want to encourage heresy, and because that's philosophy. That's what it's the same thing.
Dude, you are so busted. When the Christians take over, I'm so going to flip on you, Wretch. I'm sorry, but I'm going to be like, look, okay, this guy was behind it the whole time. No, he's behind. Listen to what you just said. It's creepy satanic stuff that you're doing, right? Not that I don't fully support it, but you know,
I got you. Yeah.
But like honestly, I wish like so many people would just like relax and try to approach reality in a playful, artistic way, in an engaging way. Like go smoke some weed, sit and meditate. You'll be surprised if you listen and you confront yourself what you find.
Yeah, our communion of Asterion works a lot better than a sip of wine. I can tell you that, and some crackers.
Welcome to our church. Right. Look, in all seriousness, though, I mean, aren't you talking really, Wretch? This very same physics going on in the background there. I mean, we're talking church and the use of a communion. You know, aren't you really talking about real mystery there? I mean, do we get it as Christians? Do we really get that communion? I don't think so.
No. And it's a total distraction, and the way that they, you know, demonize plants or whatever, they're trying to point us in the exact opposite direction, and anything else is to risk hellfire. So don't look at the man behind the curtain. It's the Wizard of Oz, basically.
You know, and they get away with it because, like, we also have to have an honest discussion, right? The path of the magician or the witch is not an easy path, right? And when you're engaging with reality in its entirety, in the all, when you're trying to seek the all, you run dangers. you know? And people do fall prey to things like addiction. You know, when you're engaging with sex and drugs, that's always something you have to worry about. You have to practice, like Ammon always says, the dote and the antidote, balance in all things. Like, this is not something you can just do willy-nilly at the same time.
Do you think, Snappy, it could be that we have a recipe that we could give ourselves that could bring us to a level where our brains are actually functioning at a higher, with higher efficiency, and parts of your brain is talking to other parts that it doesn't usually talk to? Do you think there's like a potential for real health behind this?
This is already happening. We already know this happens with intense yoga and meditation. And like, this is something that Wretch and I are going to talk about. He reprogrammed and genetically altered his genes through the use of psychedelics. Do you want to talk about that a bit?
Well, I don't know that I altered my genes, but through what's called neuroplasticity, you can shift your brain and
I know that DMT definitely rewired my brain.
Though who knows, with epigenetics, there's all kinds of things that psychedelics could actually be altering your DNA in certain ways too. So the science is kind of vague on that, as I understand it. But
the point is, though, is you are rewiring the brain, right?
We can overcome obsessive compulsive disorder. Science has shown that psilocybin is actually the best medicine for obsessive compulsive disorder because it temporarily heightens neuroplasticity, which allows you to reset your brain and break patterns and to question your assumptions and to just
it's you know what it is? You're all so close to describing what happens when you have this rewiring from psychedelics, and what it is it's like an awakening. It's like a sobering thing that happens. Like, all of a sudden you go, oh my God, what the fuck am I doing? I got to stop doing this. This is the shit I need to fix right now. And then that week you will fix that thing. Or like, oh my God, my whole room's been a mess for months. I haven't cleaned the room out. All the drawers are just stuffed with shit that I just throw in there. I'm gonna reorder it and make it all like nice and organized. Like, it does that to you. For me, it was DMT, not psilocybin. But from what I understand, they're pretty much the same molecular structure. The two
very
substances.
close,
yeah. They're very, very similar. Like, when I've done psilocybin, what I find is you have less intense hallucinations, but very similar. So like, I still get the same 3D kind of effects and the snake effects. You see snakes all the time on both DMT and on mushrooms.
Yeah.
You know, and like, that is, I find, so there is a similarity, but it's also like DMT is usually over in a minute, right? Or a couple minutes.
5 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, whereas like psilocybin comes in waves, and depending on how much you do, it can last for a day or two.
Yeah, DMT, as soon as you take it, you're gonna hear a buzzing sound, like a flies in your ear, and it gets louder and louder and louder, and then eventually you're gone. And
then
you
have that breaking moment.
And then after a couple minutes, 3 to 5 minutes, you'll start something like a pin drop or something will bring you back to reality. Oh shit, I'm back. And then that's it. It's like there's no hangover, no nothing. It's like it didn't even happen almost. But you will come out of it with that realization. Like, there's that post nut realization when you after intercourse. That's kind of like that, where you come back out of it and you're like, oh fuck, I gotta fix my life. It's amazing. It's amazing.
You get a fresh perspectives, and you get your priorities in order, and if you're feeling guilty about something, it's going to confront you with it probably too.
That's a good thing, right?
Yeah, and it's a good thing. So you can actually learn your lesson and move beyond, rather than just saying some Hail Marys or something and then going to molest some more kids or whatever you're doing.
But this is actually a good place to start winding things down, just because we're actually going to be getting together next week for another Witches Symposium that's going to be focused all on entheogens. So you guys are welcome if you want to join. But yeah, it was definitely going to be Wretch and Dion and I again talking about that. So if anyone has any last few questions here for Ammon or for Neal or for Wretch or I, let us know. And thank you all for tuning in. It's been a huge amount of fun. And is there anything you guys want to just end off on when we're talking about magic here, you know, and what you want to leave our audience with?
I'll start. It's much more reasoned than you think it is, and there's a beauty to it. There's a real artistic beauty to it. When you see that classical magic, wow, it just it's gorgeous. And I would recommend anybody that can jump in. I'm giving you the opposite direction, right? It's a satanic thing, right? But jump into that, how this ancient magic formed the world around itself. Love it. Thank you for having me, Snappy.
My pleasure. Our pleasure with Wretch.
Yeah, thanks for being here. What about you, Neal?
Do you have anything to add, Neal?
Man, I really do think that we are changing the way people look at religion. And no longer is there a monopoly on these monotheistic Bible religions that you have to choose between, you know, some sort of Judeo-Christian Islamic religion, or you have to go all the way to India and choose their religions. No. We're bringing back the actual ancient rites that predate the Bible. We're going back to ancient Greece. We're going back to ancient Rome. We're going back to ancient Egypt. We're going back to all these ancient, even African traditions. We're bringing those. Let's bring it all back to the table and give people options. Give people the option to choose the real ancient rites that all these modern religions, because face it, Christianity is a modern religion. It's not an ancient religion. It's a modern religion. These modern religions borrowed from these ancient religions, and we're showing you where it came from so that you can have a better understanding of these rites, and then you can have a more fulfilled religious life. If you don't want, if you're not an atheist, yeah. The option is yours, yeah.
So I'll just finish off by saying, to me, magic grows when you know thyself and you overcome your fears and you face your fears. These are all a related process. That's how you realize you're a divine being. And know yourself and you'll know the gods.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Wretch. Yeah, I'm going to say just almost the same thing that's already been elucidated here. It's that magic is this twofold thing. It's taking back religion and spirituality for yourself. You get to define it. You get to explore the universe and take what works for you and discard what doesn't. You are the authority. You take authority for yourself as a divine being, as the divine beings that we all are, you know. And also want to stress that a huge part of this is, like Wretch was saying, it's about that shadow work. It's about going into yourself and facing yourself and transforming, shedding your skin like the snake to be reborn anew. You know, this is powerful stuff. And it's not always pleasant, but it's worth it. It's truly transformative, you know? Well, thank you, everyone. Yeah, hail Satan.
Can I just say hail Satan to that? Hail Satan to that. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. And yeah, we'll see you all next week for the next Witches Symposium. And thank you guys all for tuning in. We're drawing down the stars. Have a good one.